Welcome back to another episode of Adoptions from the Heart TV. I'm your host, Amanda Aliberti. Today we're going to be speaking with Dr. Erin Meyer, a hospitalist who is going to be talking a little bit about prenatal drug exposure. One of the biggest concerns that adopting families have in the process is the health of their future child. Now let's turn into Danielle Goodman. Take it away.
Thanks, Erin, so much. Can you kind of talk to us a little bit about being a hospital pediatrician and kind of what that looks like with exposure to these babies?
Sure, yeah. As a pediatrician, we are notified by the OBGYNs every time there's a baby who's born and has exposure to any drug, essentially. Most of those babies are put on a 5 to 7 day mandatory observation period where we watch for signs of withdrawal. I would say probably about 80 to 90% of those kids get treated for withdrawal, and that usually looks like a 2 to 3 week course of time in the hospital where they're withdrawing from whatever drugs they were exposed to. We work on feeding them every 3 hours, giving them their medication, and they also get occupational and physical therapy to help with some of the side effects of drug exposure.
What does those withdrawal symptoms kind of look like?
Sure.
What are people looking for?
Sure. We pay attention to how well the baby's eating, how well the baby's sleeping, and most notably, how tightly the baby is laying in the bed. Normal babies are a little bit on the floppy side. Babies who are exposed to drugs usually are pretty tight, and they don't want to move around a whole lot, and they're very irritable. So okay. we try to keep them calm and comfortable, and that's where the therapists come to work on their motion and their ability or their movements so that they don't get too tight. And the treatment for the withdrawal is based on helping them to relax and just be as normal a babies as we can get them to be.
So 89% seems like a pretty high number. Is there any difference between what kind of exposure those babies had in utero?
Yeah, it's any baby that's exposed on a chronic basis.
Okay.
Not the babies who are exposed like, oops, mom took Percocet because she got in a car accident at 4 months of pregnancy and it was over. It's the babies who are exposed on a chronic basis are more likely to go through the withdrawal process.
Okay. And so besides just that in the hospital being medicated, what are we looking for like long term for those prognosis of babies?
Sure.
So that's what kind of adoptive parents want to know.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the biggest fear that people have when you're thinking about adopting a baby who has exposure to drugs is, am I going to end up with a kid who has brain damage or who's going to be, the worst performer in class or need all the special ed or that kind of thing. Most of the babies do well. Most of them do just fine. Most of the studies have reported some degree of potential increase for having a learning disability or being diagnosed with some sort of educational or behavioral disorder. But when you look at the whole scheme of things, for example, about 12% of kids are diagnosed with a learning disorder or some kind of need for special education. 16% of kids who are exposed to drugs are also given that diagnosis. So there's really only about a 4% difference between drug exposure and not drug exposure, and still needing a learning disability, or meeting criteria. So it's not
like a huge
difference, right?
Okay,
right.
That's good to know.
Yeah, it's fairly small.
Yeah. What other kind of thought processes that can you have as a doctor on this thing of like how to make families a little bit more comfortable? Because it doesn't seem like long-term prognosis is that big of a deal. I think it's definitely a lot of the short-term, the unknown of like, is the baby going to be medicated, having a longer hospital stay?
Yeah.
But other than that piece of it, could you give anything to maybe some adoptive parents considering opening up their situations to being open to drug-exposed babies? Like what?
Sure. So here's my from the heart pediatrician answer to that.
Okay.
In the hospital pediatrician anyway, my job is to send babies who are born home with families.
Okay.
And any time that I can send a baby home with a family who I know is going to do the best they can for that baby and is putting that baby first and is putting that baby in a supportive, loving, welcoming environment, that is a blessing and makes my heart happy versus some of the other times I have to send babies home and I know that's not the case. So I know that the families who have gone through the adoption process and are going through the adoption process are on a different level than some of the other families that we send kids home to, which is the hardest part of my job. So anytime we can send babies home with awesome families who are looking to adopt, that's awesome.
That's good to know. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking time out of your very busy schedule at the hospital to come here and chat with us.
You're welcome, my pleasure.
Thank you so much, Erin and Danielle. Feel free, if you'd like to learn more about prenatal drug exposure, to take one of Erin Meyer's classes learning all about it. Thanks so much, and tune in next week.